Hey, everybody, welcome to The Bridge. We are, over the next few weeks, going to look at virtue. And this is an interesting topic for us as we are engaging in this world that we are in. What does virtue look like? What are the virtues and how do we display them in this society that we're in? There are so many challenges to the world that we're in. What's kind of interesting for us right now is that the world that we are in has so many challenges. I had breakfast with some friends earlier this week, and we were talking about how it seems like you have to have an opinion on everything that is out there. There's a real division in opinions about all kinds of things, whether it's pandemic related or whether it's government related. There are all kinds of things that we can be divided on. And there's almost an expectation that we need to have an opinion. We have to pick a side. We always have to pick a side. And I don't know if you experience that, but certainly I've experienced that. It seems like everything needs to be debated these days. Some would say that we are in the age of perpetual offense, that it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to offend somebody. It doesn't matter what you say, somebody's going to be offended by what you say, or you're going to be offended by whatever somebody else says. And we are in a culture that is really a cancel culture. And you know how that affects us in how we relate to one another is really challenging. So every great pursuit seems to have these two characters in it. Every great story, every great movie has this. There's a villain and there's a victim. And throughout society, this is what has driven us. These are the great moments in society when there is a villain and then there is a victim, and then the hero comes between the villain and the victim. The hero is the one that protects the victim. And in some, really good stories, what happens is that the hero actually ends up victimizing the villain. And in our society over the past several years, we have experienced all kinds of movements, and there have been some very serious offenses, and things that were done in back rooms and out of sight are all of a sudden being brought to light. There have been some villains who, through some movements in society, especially within social media, that have actually opened the doors to what's really going on. And people have responded to that, whether it's the Me Too movement or other movements. There have been certain movements that have brought to light some victimization that's been going on. And the villains, in turn, have been victimized. But here's the challenge, is that over this period of time, we have gotten a real thirst for this and a real energy for this. And so we have actually changed the definition of villain to just someone with a dissenting perspective. We cancel people because they have a different perspective on how the government is handling the pandemic, or whether you wear a mask or whether you get a vaccine. We will cancel people, or we will block people who have dissenting views. And we are very easily offended when somebody posts something that is opposed to our own views. And I'm no different than that. I get offended pretty easily. And I recognize that that's because it's the culture that I'm in, or I'm in a culture of people who are easily offended. Here's a pretty true statement. If you're on a continuous search to be offended, you'll always find what you're looking for. There are so many opportunities out there in this society to be offended. And some of us are just looking for that because we are looking for the opportunity to be the hero that stands between the villain and the victim. But the problem is that we've really lowered the bar for what a villain is. We've just decided that somebody who has an opposing view to us is a villain. When you look at society and what has happened to people, you have a sports figure who decided to kneel for the national anthem because he viewed that as a way of protesting what he saw going on in the country, and ended up having his life destroyed, his career destroyed. We are looking to destroy people simply because they have dissenting views. We, instead of responding to the specific acts, the specific things that people do and correcting those things, we go for the jugular and we look at canceling them and we look at destroying them. And that's a society that we find ourselves in these days. And it's so counter to what Jesus taught, and it's so counter to what the apostles taught about how we are to treat one another. When we look at the picture of the hero coming between the villain and the victim, that so much is true to the gospel. It describes the gospel, but Jesus' attention wasn't on the villain. Jesus' attention was on restoring the victim. Whereas our view in this cancel culture is to focus on the one that we view as the villain. And we focus all our attention on destroying that person. But Paul says in the book to Romans, he says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. Honor one another. Honoring one another is not canceling one another simply because somebody has a different view than you. And it may even be something that you have a very strong opinion about. But we can't cancel people. You know, it's interesting, as part of this breakfast, I get into some really great conversations sometimes over breakfast. And we've been talking about how some people have laid, just drilled down on a specific point. You've known their perspective on something related to the pandemic right from the get-go, and their opinion hasn't changed, and they keep sending out information. And to the point that I already know what they're going to say, and long ago I've actually stopped paying attention to it because I already know what they're going to say. How do I honor this person who I have a ton of respect for, and yet in the society, still value what I value about the person, while I completely disagree with their perspective? See, I believe that God calls us to that with this whole point, the idea of honoring one another even when we disagree with them, honoring one another not because we agree with their perspective, but honoring them because they simply are created in the image of God. I don't have to agree with them to honor them. The question that I want to look at today is simply this: how do we honor one another in a cancel culture? How do we honor one another in a cancel culture when the world is telling us that we have to pick a side? How do we honor one another? How do we honor one another when we feel strongly about an issue that somebody has a completely opposing view to? God calls us to honor one another. And what does it look like in this cancel culture? There's a really interesting passage in the book of Mark, and it's in chapter 6. And just to kind of build the groundwork, or do a little groundwork before we enter into this, Jesus, just previously in chapter 6, he has healed several people, and he has actually raised a young girl from the dead. That's what is going on right up to chapter 6. And then we pick this up in chapter 6. It says, Jesus left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. The next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. They asked, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? Jesus' teaching was incredible, but also his reputation was growing. He had raised someone from the dead. He was healing many people, and lots was going on. But get what comes next, because this is really important. This is Jesus in his hometown. It says, then they scoffed him. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and his sisters live right here among us. They were deeply offended. Deeply offended. Why? I mean, just in the previous paragraph, it's talking about his amazing teaching. It's talking about what he is accomplishing. It's talking about the miracles he's performed. And somehow they're offended simply because he's a carpenter. Or they know him. They know his family. Like, what is so offensive about that? They refused to believe in him. Now, get this. Then Jesus told them, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his family. I've known this passage for a long time, and as I've thought about this passage, it's so interesting. What is Jesus looking for in this? Is Jesus looking for them to roll out the red carpet? Has Jesus been healing people and teaching and doing all of these powerful things for his benefit so that he would be honored? Is he offended that they aren't honoring him? I'm going to just pause for a second. And maybe if you have your Bibles with you as you're watching this, maybe you can go back and you can start at verse 1 of Mark chapter 6 and read through this again. I want you to look for, number one, what is so offensive about Jesus to his relatives and the people, his homies? And then, what is Jesus looking for? I'll be right back. I think to understand what Jesus is looking for and fully grasp what he is saying when he's talking about being without honor and what that actually means, we kind of need to understand what honor is. And so I'm going to give you two Greek words. Atomos is to be without honor, to dishonor, to treat as common or treat as ordinary. And when we look at the passage that's describing how Jesus was treated, they made an effort just to tear him down, to just make him normal after he had done some pretty exceptional things. He's talking about that being dishonored. To honor is time, looks like time, but it's time, to value, respect, or highly esteem, to treat as precious, weighty, or valuable. So when we look at to honor, what does it mean to honor? Or what does honor do? It esteems, it cherishes, it values, it builds up, it believes the best. When we honor somebody, we choose to believe the best about them. We will esteem them, we will honor them, we value them. But when we dishonor, it treats someone as just someone common. It tears down. It makes an effort to make ourselves look better than them. When we dishonor, we treat as common, we tear down, we devalue, and we assume the worst. That's an interesting thing. I'm going to muddy the water a little bit. I did a bit of a search on what is the difference between respect and honor. And for our discussion today, I'm going to talk about how respect is earned, but honor is given. And to understand how honor comes into play, the question is, can I honor someone without respecting them? And for this conversation, I'm going to say yes. See, I was raised to honor my elders. That means that, if we are at Joy on a Sunday and I'm sitting in my chair and someone older, well, let's say my mother comes along and there's no chair for her, I'm going to give up my chair so that she can be seated and I would sit on the floor. It's just a form of honoring my mother. Is she capable of sitting on the ground? Sure. But I wouldn't feel right about that. I need to honor my mother. But it's not just my mother. I also actually honor a lot of people who are just older than me. If I see somebody who is older and is walking down with their chair down to sit, and I'm on my game, sometimes I'm completely distracted and miss this, but if I am paying attention, I will go and help them get their chair and set it up. Can they set up their own chair? Absolutely. Do they need me to do that? Absolutely not. But it is a form of honoring. And I honor them even if I don't know them. Now, it's simply because they're old. And what have they done to get old? Maybe they actually got old because they never took a risk in their lives. Maybe they were the ones that did nothing to the benefit of anyone else, but they've just gotten older. It's not because they've done something to earn my respect. Getting old doesn't mean that they've done something incredible that deserves my respect. And yet I honor them because of who they are, not because of what they've done. I've been watching the Olympics. There are some athletes out there that are incredible. They have earned my respect. But respect is something that is earned. Honor is something that is given. And I can give honor to somebody because I respect what they've done. But in most cases, we simply honor people because of who they are. And so when we look back at this encounter that Jesus has with his hometown crowd, it says they scoffed and were deeply offended. And so the question is, how is that any different than the cancel culture we find ourselves in now? I think that actually defines exactly where we find ourselves. We scoff and we are deeply offended simply because somebody has an opposing view to ours. We need to demonstrate honor in this culture that we find ourselves in. Does that mean that we agree completely with everybody? Absolutely not. See, honor is not an action. Honor is an attitude in an action. See, I can disagree with someone and I can disrespect and dishonor them as well, or I can disagree with someone and I can honor and with my honoring demonstrate a respect for them. See, we can honor people when we disagree. We can honor people when we correct them. We can honor people in our attitude towards how we interact with them. Even if we disagree with them, we can do the honorable thing of treating them with honor. Now, the Bible gives us a few people that we are to honor, and it's interesting. There's a couple from the Old Testament here, honor God, but that thematically, I think you would agree with me, plays out into the New Testament. We are to honor our parents, and I think, again, that comes from the big Ten Commandments, but it plays out again in Ephesians. It plays out in other places where we are to honor our parents. We are to honor those in authority. And you go, what? See, we are to honor those in authority. Scripture continually repeats that. Jesus demonstrates that. Now, here's the question. Can I honor someone that I don't respect? And I would say, yes. I would say that I can honor people that I don't even know, who have done nothing to earn my respect, and yet it's my responsibility as a Christ follower to honor them. We live in a democracy. We live in a very interesting environment, in a place where we are given the opportunity to participate in the democratic process. We have the opportunity to voice our opposition. We can peacefully protest, and we can do that in an honorable way. See, we can disagree and still honor one another in our disagreement. But we've got to stop villainizing people who have opposing views. We've got to stop villainizing people from different political parties, people with different stances on what to do in the pandemic. We've got to stop villainizing people and honor people even when we disagree with them. There are people who disagree with me. I mean, that's no surprise. You watching, you're probably one of them. And yet, I have experienced some incredible, honorable behavior towards me from people who disagree with me. Some people who have disagreed with something that I have said have made great efforts to communicate their disagreement with me while at the same time not dishonoring me or tearing me down or canceling me. So why does all of this matter? Why are we instructed to honor God and our parents and those in authority and our pastors and spiritual leaders? Well, let's keep reading this whole passage in Mark. It says, Jesus describes how he can't gain honor in his hometown, and it says, and because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them except to place hands on a few sick people and heal them. It doesn't say Jesus wouldn't. It says Jesus couldn't. Unless we demonstrate honor, we limit. Well, let's look back at this list. When we look back at this list, if I could look back at this list, if we don't honor God, as Jesus demonstrates, we limit his ability to bring healing in our lives, to do big miracle things in our lives. When we don't honor our parents, we limit the amount of teaching they can do for us. We limit their ability to mold us into the people that we should be. Now, does that mean that there are some parents out there who don't deserve respect? There have been some really abusive parents. Let's not forget that honoring is something that we give. Respect is something that they deserve. When we honor our parents, even when we disagree with them, we give our relationship with them the ability to influence us for the better. When we honor those in authority, we give them the ability to protect us in society. When we constantly dishonor those in authority, we weaken them. When you look at the defund the police movement, it went from trying to weed out some bad apples within policing to all of a sudden trying to dishonor the entire policing forces, all the police forces throughout, defund them, get rid of them. Well, we can get rid of them and they can stop being able to protect us. We've got to stop villainizing organizations. We've got to stop villainizing those in authority over us. You know, this one's fairly easy for me to talk about. Honoring our pastors and spiritual leaders. Now, I can do this because I'm really not a leader within the bridge. I'm a teaching pastor, and because I'm up in front of this, people look at me as somebody who has authority within the organization, but I actually am not on leadership teams. But it's because of those leadership teams that I'm able to do what I do. And I need to honor them for what they do, for the leadership. I need to give them honor in order that we, as the Bridge Community Church, can grow into the organization that God wants us to be. But if I continually dishonor them, I weaken their ability to do what God calls them to do. We need to honor those so that those that are in authority over us, so that we give them the ability to improve our lives. If we constantly dishonor, we will suffer the consequences of that. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do anything. Honor one another above ourselves. There's an interesting passage in Matthew as we talk about what honoring looks like, honoring God. What does honoring God look like? And Jesus says this, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." You know, you can say all you want about how good God is. You can have some great prayers, but if it's just lip service, it actually means nothing. It doesn't accomplish anything. Jesus is not the little baby in the manger anymore. Jesus is your healer and provider. Jesus is my king. And I need to honor him as my king to give him the authority and ability to even bless me, to even lead me in the life that he desires for me. I need to give him that ability through honoring him. And it's not just about saying things. We need to say and talk to God and honor him with our words, but words aren't enough. We need to honor him with our finances. You can say that, you will give anything to God. Well, how are you doing at like a weekly donation? Are you honoring God with the money that he is bringing into you? We honor God with our tithe, even though that's an Old Testament concept, but that's what I do. We honor God this way. We honor God by honoring one another above ourselves. You can talk about how people don't deserve honor, but I am telling you that we are instructed to honor one another above ourselves. And it's not because they deserve our respect because of something they've done. They deserve our honor because of who they are. You see, in my relationship with Jen, with my spouse, she's absolutely beautiful. And I love to tell her that. There will be times that she'll walk into my office in the morning as she's headed out to work, and just what she's wearing, I'm just going, man, you're hot. I will say things to Jen because I love her. She actually deserves my respect. But even that aside, because I honor her with my actions in how I do things for her, and I honor her with my words and the things I say to her about who she is. The interesting thing is that because of my relationship with her, I started to actually honor her family. And it wasn't necessarily because of anything they had done. It's simply because they were connected to her. And you know what I found? Is that the more that I honored Jen's family, they actually became more honorable in my experience with them. The more we honor people, the more honorable they become. When you ascribe honor to someone, often they become honorable. Do you want to have a great marriage? Do you want to have an honorable spouse? Try honoring them. And it might be difficult because you're going to say they don't deserve it. Of course they don't deserve it. Honor isn't given to those who deserve it. It's given to those simply because of who they are. We are to honor our spouses. And the more we honor our spouse, the more honorable that relationship typically becomes. Here's the thing. I honor Jen's family because of my connection to Jen. I honor all the one another's in my life because of my relationship with God. God calls us to honor his children, and we are called to honor one another. Join us next week as we look at another virtue.